Okay, we are holding Daf Ches, Daf Tes, I'm sorry, but we're starting from Daf Ches Omud Sheni by the Mishnah. Okay, let's just make it larger. And this is very, very nice, familiar material today. Ein bein svarim l'tfilin mezuzas. There's no difference between the way you write a Sefer Torah and other tefillin and mezuzas. Now, I just want to bring this up. Here we go. This is the Sefer Torah, the Tanakh. So when we say Svarim, is all the Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Eksuvim, right? So this is the list of all the. So the Mishnah says, "Ein bein Svarim l'tefillin mezuzas el asher Svarim nichtavim b'chol lashon." Interesting is that you could write a Sefer Torah in English and in the script of English. And according to the way the Rishonim learn, you could be Yoitza Kriyas Torah with that. So the Svarim Sifrei Torah can be written b'chol lashon, in any language, the script of any language and the language itself. Utfilin mezuzas loy eina nichtavis ela ashuras. Tefillin and mezuzas that have to be written ashuras. So what is ashuras again? So this is ashuras. This is this type of script and this type of Hebrew. That's what the Mishnah is saying. That's the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Af b'svarim lo hitiru sheyikasvu ela yavanus." Even Sifrei Torah, if you're going to read it in another language to be Yotze Kriyas Torah, it was only permitted Greek language, Yavanisha language, the Greek language. That's it. But nothing else. Everything else, it has to be written in Ashuris. And Ashuris is that language, that Hebrew script. And it's called Ashuris because either it comes from Assyria or Ashuris means it's a special type of calligraphy, not regular calligraphy that you see on the page here. So the Gemara says like this. So you tell me that the only difference the Mishnah says is between a Sefer Torah and Tanakh and Tefillin and Mezuzas is that the Svarim can be written in any language. To sew it with sinus, to metama your hands. We learned that Sifrei Kodesh are metama yadayim, right? We learned that din, either because they used to put truma next to Sifrei Kodesh, or they don't want you touching your hands onto the scrolls. So the Chachamim made a gzeira that a Sifrei Tanakh, if it's holy, it will be metame your yadayim. So to sew it and with sinus and to be metame yadayim, zev zeh shavim, they're both equal. That means just like in tefillin and mezuzas, by tefillin, you know, when they sew the tefillin together and they sew the box, they use the gidim, the veins of an animal, right? This is how it looks. Here. This type of material. So they use this type of material, which is from an animal, to sew the box. And a mezuzah also, you can ask me, where does the mezuzah have sinus? In case the mezuzah rips, you could actually sew it together, the two parshias, with this gidim. But so the Mishnah teaches you that also a Sefer Torah, there was an opinion that you could join the rolls together, the each page of the parchment together with strings of pishtim, of flax. So our Mishnah seems to imply not like that opinion, and that it could only be used, gidim, regular sinus from an animal, and nothing else. Because if that would have been a difference between Sefer Torah and Tefillin Mezuzos, the Mishnah should have listed that. Then we learned in the Mishnah that a Sefarim Nichtavim b'chol lashon, a Sefer Torah, and any Hebrew book could be written in any language. So Uraminu. So let me ask you a stira. Mikra, there's a brisa that says, Mikra, you have a pasuk in Chumash, Sheksavoy Targum. You translated it into Aramaic. So it's not in the Hebrew language anymore. You translate it into Aramaic. That's Targum language. Or Targum, or you have a pasuk in Chumash that's written in Aramaic language. And Rashi brings an example. There's a pasuk that says, Yigar Sahadusa, right? Lavan called that pile of stones Yigar Sahadusa. That language, that was written in Aramaic. It happens to be in the Chumash. But if you translate it and write the word Gal Eid, which means the same word in Hebrew, that's also no good. Basically, you're passing a Sefer Torah by changing the language. It doesn't make it it's a holy Sefer Torah. Uksav Ivri, or you wrote the whole Sefer Torah in Hebrew and correctly, but instead of using Ashuris, you use the regular Hebrew alphabet. So the Mishnah Brisa says, Eina matamas yadayim. It doesn't defile your hands because it's not a kedusha diga sefer. Ad until shichtavenu b'ksav Ashuris al hasefer uvidyoyim. Until you write it with Ashuris, that calligraphy al hasefer on parchment uvidyoy and with ink. So what's the question? Question is that our Mishnah says that a Sefer Torah is kosher not only if it's written in Hebrew, you write it in English, but you can write it in the English language and it'll still be mitamid yadayim. And here this Brisa says as once you make one change, whether you change the language or you change the script, it's already not mitamid yadayim. Rava said, loikash, it's not difficult. We go to Tes Amud Aleph. Now, our Mishnah, Rava changes around for temporarily, this is not the final answer, our understanding of our Mishnah. When our Mishnah says it's kosher, it means begufan shalanu. You wrote it in Hebrew, but the language that you used was English, but you wrote it in the Hebrew script. So if you wrote it in this script, but you wrote it in English, it made English words out of them. So then what's going to be? It's going to be kosher. So the main thing is ksav. It has to be in the Hebrew script Ashuras. It can, but that Brisa, which parcels it, begufan shalahem. They only made one change. You used the Hebrew language, but you used a different script. You didn't use Ashuras. So you changed it around the ksav, and that's why it's possible. So it's not a difficult thing. The main thing is ksav. The font has to be Hebrew language. It doesn't matter if you're using English or not, but that's the point. So that's the temporarily teretz. Amalei Abayah. So Abayah says, "B'maya kintelaihi." What did you just say that Brisa is talking about? The reason why it's not metame the yadayim, it's because the Brisa is talking about begufan shlehem. You wrote it in their script. You wrote it in the Aramaic script, not in Hebrew script. So then what's the difference if you change the language? My area, why does the Brisa make a difference? Mikra sheksavi targum. If it's a Hebrew word, you wrote it in Aramaic. With targum sheksavi mikra, or a targum word you wrote in Hebrew, afila mikra sheksavi mikra, even if it was a Hebrew word, and you wrote it in Hebrew, but targum sheksavi targum, and it was a targum word and you wrote it in Aramaic, name. It's possible. It should also be possible because as the main thing is, if you change around from Ashuris to another alphabet, that would passel it. So why does the Brisa says you changed around the language of the Chumash? Even if you didn't change around the language, you kept it all written in Hebrew, but you wrote it in the English alphabet. Let's say it would be passel. Doktani, because the Brisa says the main thing is that you have to write it. You should write it Ashuris, Asefer, B'diyai, until you write it with a parchment with ink and with Ashuris. So it seems to be that the Brisa holds, and this is clear to make it where we're up to, that even if you change around the Lashon, not the Ksav, even if you're using Hebrew language, but you just change around the language and you're using the Hebrew alphabet, it would also be possible. And therefore, one change, according to the Brisa, whether you change around the Ksav, or whether you change around the Lashon, the language, or you change around the alphabet, it passes a Sefer Torah. But our Mishnah seems to imply that everything is kosher, whether you change around both. Even if you change around Lashon and Ksav, you wrote it in English and the English alphabet, it would still be kosher. So how do you resolve that? Ella loy kasha. It's not difficult. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanim. But that Brisa that says everything is possible is Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. As we learned that a ton of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, he says, no, you cannot change the language and the alphabet of the Torah. It has to be written in Hebrew and Ashuris. So the Gemara says, but Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, if you held that our Brisa goes according to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, ha'ika yavanis, but Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says that if you make it in the Greek language, it would still be kosher. And that Brisa does not give the leniency of making it in the Greek language. It just says a plain out statement that no matter what you're changing in the Torah, it becomes a non-kosher Torah that's not Matame Yadayim. So again, how do you resolve the Brisa to our Mishnah? Ela Kasha, it's not difficult. Kan Besvarm. Our Mishnah says clearly, we're talking about Sifrei Tanakh, or the Svarm of Tach, Chumash, Navi, Ksuvim. Kan, but that brisa, which is very strict that you can't change anything, is betfillin and mezuzahs. Why? Because tefillin and mezuzahs is my tama. What's the reason why tefillin and mezuzahs has to only be written in Hebrew and with the ksav ashuris, with that alphabet, mishum diksiv, because the sebahu, it says in the Kriya Shema, the hayu, b'havayasan yehu. It has to be the normal way it's written in the Hebrew language. And when you're writing it also has to be with the Hebrew alphabet. And this halacha applies by tefillin and mezuzahs, not by other sifrei kodesh. So wait a second. If it's talking about Kriya Shema, so what's the example that the Brisa says? Ma targum shekazvay mikra ikra. How could the Brisa say that there's a possibility to have something written in the Aramaic language and you're writing it over in Hebrew? Bishlama, if you said, it makes sense, Torah. If you said that the Brisa was talking about the regular Torah, so Iker, there are psukim that are written in Aramaic, and the Brisa is giving you an example. Don't change it into Hebrew. What's the example? Yigar sohadusa. It's a pasuk in Parshas Vayetzi, end of Vayetzi, where the Chumash uses the Aramaic word, and you're turning it into a Hebrew word by translating this word into Hebrew called Galed. Elahacha. But if you say the Brisa is talking about only Kriya Shema, my Targum Ika, which word in Kriya Shema is written in Aramaic? So the Gemara says, Elaloi kasha. You have to say a new teretz. That kan b'Megillah, the Brisa that's very strict, that it has to be written in Hebrew and Ashuris, it's only talking about Megillas. Megillas Esther can only be written in Hebrew and Ksav Ashuris. Kan, but our Mishnah, which is very lenient, bisvarem, with other books, with other Sifrei Tanakh. And with other Sifrei Tanakh, you could write it in any language you want. So Megillah, so the Gemara asks, my timer, what's the reason why a Megillah cannot be written in any other language besides Hebrew with the Ashuris Ksav? The Ksiv Kich Savam V'chil Shainam. The Gemara darshan from a pasuk, it has to be like the Hebrew script and the language of the Hebrew. That's the only way you can have a Megillah to be a kosher Megillah. So the Gemara says, okay, if that's what the Brisa is talking about, where's there a pasuk in the Megillah Esther that's written in Aramaic and you're changing it to Hebrew? My targum sheksava mikra ika. What's an example of a word written in the Megillah that's written in Aramaic and you're writing it in Hebrew? Everything in the Megillah Esther seems to be written in Hebrew. And says the Gemara, Rapapa, look carefully. Rapapa gave you an answer. He says, if you look carefully at Megillah Esther, there are Aramaic words. For example, Benishma Pisgam Hamelech. The word Pisgam is an Aramaic word. Pisgam in English means edict, but in Aramaic they write Pisgam, and in Hebrew, if you change this word Pisgam into Devar, then it becomes no good. That's what we're saying over here. So that's the example. Or Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar v'chol hanashim yitnu yikar lebaleihem. Here's another example of a word in the Megillah Esther that's Aramaic. The word yikar doesn't appear in the Chumash. It's a Aramaic word meaning respect and honor. So if you translate yikar, you wrote in the Megillah, v'chol hanashim yitnu kavod lebaleihem, it's no good. The only question I have is that there is another word, yikar, teferes gedulasai, in the beginning of Megillah Esther. And why did the Gemara use this example that's written at the end of the first parak? There's actually a pasuk, it says the word yikar earlier. And so I don't know why Reb Nachman chose the second pasuk where it mentions the word yikar as the example. Anyway, so that's the first teretz. So what's the first teretz? The first teretz, a brisa that's very strict, that you can't change the language or the alphabet, is talking about what? The Megillah Esther. And our Mishnah is talking about a regular Sefer Torah. Rav Ashi says, Ki tanyehi b'shar svarim. You can even learn that brisa is by other svarim. And every Sefer, you cannot change around the Sefer Torah, nothing. It has to be Hebrew with Ashuris. But Rabbi Yehuda is the opinion, because Rabbi Yehuda only gives you the exception of Yavanis only by Sefrei Torah, but not by Novi and Ksuvim. Okay, the Tanya we learned in a brisa. Tefillin umezuzah ein nichtavim el ashuris. A tefillin and mezuzah cannot be written only in ashuris. V'Rabbi Seinu, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, this was Rabbi Seinu, hitiru b'Yavanis. He gave a heter that you could write it in Yavonus. So the Brisa makes absolutely no sense. So how could you, Rabbi Seinu, how could Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel allow you to write a tefillin mezuzah in Greek? But it says v'hayu. Ella, Ema, you must change around that Brisa. The Brisa is saying, Sefarim nichtavim b'chaloshin. Any sefer in Tanakh can be written in any language. Rabbi Seinu, he tira v'yonis. But Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who's Rabbi Seinu, he gave a heter for Greek. Hirtiru, he gave the heter to write it in Greek. B'chlal the kana kama asar. Does that mean that the first Tana holds that writing a sefer in any language is asar? But they did write Sefarim nichtavim b'chaloshin. So the Brisa is missing a few words. So this is the way you're supposed to read this Brisa. Ela, here's the clear version of the Brisa. Rabbi Seinu loy hitiru shekosve eliyabonis. The Tanakama holds you could write it in any language. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you could write it only in Greek. So it's mashma that you could write all the Sifrei Tanakh in Greek. But Tanya, no. Rabbi Yehuda says af kishetiru Rabbi Seinu yavonis. Even if they gave a heter to write it in Greek, it was only given to write a Sefer Torah in Greek. Because there was a special nace with Talmai HaMelech, Talmi the king. He was an Egyptian king. We'll learn about that nace. And because there was a nace, so they only saw a sign from heaven that if you want to translate the Torah, the only translation can be done in Greek and only a Sefer Torah. But not Novim, Ksuvim, or anything like that. Anything else from Tanakh has to be written in Hebrew and has to be written in Ashuris. So that Brisa is very strict, was talking about other Sifrei Tanakh, and it's going according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that Greek, yes, Greek is permitted, but only by a Sefer Torah. And that's not what that Brisa is talking about. Now, why did they matter Brisa? Why did they matter Greek? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Maisa Betalmei Amel, Betalmi the king, Ptolmy. That was the Greek king that took over after Alexander the Great, or one of his the next generation. They split the kingdom, and he was the king in the south. And what he did was he was an Oiv Yisrael, but he wanted a translation of the Torah. So Shekinah Shivin Ushnaim Zakanim, he took 72 of the greatest Gedolim of the Jewish people, and he gave them a separate office. He brought them into 72 different offices, separate rooms. He didn't tell them why I'm forcing you to be in your own private office. And then he walked in himself to each and every gadol. He walked into each and every gadol. And he told them, I'm hiring you, Kisvelichi Torahs Moshe Rabbeinu, and I want you to write me in Greek, the Torah of the Moshe your Rebbes. And in other words, you should translate it in Greek. Now, he told them that I have 71 other people out there doing the same thing. So if I find that you're doing something different and you're not translating it correctly, I'll know that you're lying, and then I'll punish you. So each one had to write precisely what the other one was writing, although they never were speaking with each other. They were all in separate rooms. No, and here was the big nace. The big miracle was Nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu belev kol echad ve'echad etza. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into the heart of each one of those 72 people the advice, and not to translate it in such a way that Talmud could walk away and thinking the Torah is false, or thinking that there are many gods. So they translated in such a way by changing around the psukim. They all agreed to one thought, and the following, they're going to make 14 changes in the Chumash. Because they translated Elikim bara Bereshis. For example, instead of saying Bereshis bara Elikim, in the beginning God created as a Shemaim v'aretz, which would imply, the way Rashi understands, that Bereshis, this God called Bereshis, created another God. So they instead of starting it that way, they started the Chumash by saying Elikim, the Almighty, bara Bereshis, created in the beginning the heavens and earth. They switched that order of that pasuk. That's the way Rashi learns. Or for example, the second example is the pasuk says, God said, "Let us make man." When you read that pasuk, you think that there are many gods. But so they said, instead of writing God, let us make man, they're writing Esa Adam B'Tselem Demus. I will make man. So clearly it's God talking, I'm making man. The reason why God wrote it in the plural is to teach people humility, that when you're making big decisions, you should consult other people. Even God, before creating man, so to speak, consulted with the angels.
Excuse me. I mean, I understand the second one. It's very clear. But the first one is, instead of Bereshis bara Elokim, it's Elokim. I don't understand that,
right,
because they were translating it. They wouldn't have used the word Bereshis. They would have used the Greek word for, or whatever,
beautiful,
for in the beginning. So I'm not understanding.
Beautiful.
Why you can't
So
just
your question is Taisus's question. Let's just, now that you brought it up, I'm just going to say, he just spoke out your question, and he said, they're writing it in Greek. How could he have made a mistake? Why did they have to turn it around? Elikim bara Bereshis. I told you Rashi's Peshat, and Taisus doesn't like it precisely for your question. So he said that the reason why they turned it around, because normally when you start a book, you should start with the author's name first. And they can't believe that God would start the Chumash without putting his name first. Just like when you write something, you put Baruch Hashem on top of the page or something. Of course, they knew. Let's read it inside. The proper way to start a book is to name the creator first. Then Cain, Elu Koslu Bereshis Koidem, if they wrote Bereshis first, they would say Shtei Reshuyas Haim. They would say the word Bereshis means another God. In other words, they had a Greek mythology, is that when you start a book, you always have to put the author's name first. And if you're going to put Bereshis, they're going to automatically assume Bereshis is the name of a God. Then the pasuk says, pasuk really says that God finished his work on the seventh day. They changed it that God finished the work on the sixth day. It actually says the seventh day because it looked like it was the seventh day. God's exact with his time. So that's why it says Vaychal b'yom hashvi. But so they changed it Vaychal b'yom hashishi. Then the pasuk says Zachor nekeva bara'oi. It really says V'loikasu bara'am. They didn't write Zachor nekeva bara'am like it's written in Chumash, that God created a human being with a Zachar and a Keva, both opposite each other, connected, because that would imply that God created two types of humans. Two humans, each with a Zachar and a Keva connected. So therefore, they wanted to make it clearer that God created one human being, but it was composed of a Zachar and a Keva. So they changed that to the singular. And then the same idea by the Dar Haflaga, God says, let me go down and see what they're building over there. They're building a tower. Instead of saying, let us go down, they change it, Hava Erdav Ebla Sam Shavasam. God says, I'm going down. I'm going to mix up the languages. Then the pasuk says, another pasuk V'yera, but Titzchak Sarah Bekirba. It says, God, Sarah laughed inside, but they change it Bekroiveha amongst her relatives. Why did they change it? Because they wanted God. Avram Avinu laughed and Sarah laughed, so they would question, why is Avram Avinu not punished and Sarah got punished for laughing? So they tried to say that Sarah actually publicly laughed, bikroiveha, and that's why God was more upset at her than at Avram. So they changed that. Then we had in last week's parsha, it seems to imply in one of the brachos that when Yaakov was telling Shimon, he was angry at them. He said, with your anger, hargu ish, you killed a man. They changed it to the word shor, ox, and with your will, you uprooted the feeding trough. In other words, from the psukim, it would seem that Yaakov admitted that his sons committed murder. So instead, they changed it to an ox. When Moshe Rabbeinu, in this week's parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go down to Mitzrayim, right? He was given the Mishnah. So the pasuk says that he took his wife with him and his children on a donkey. So that's embarrassing to say that the leader of the Jewish people only has a donkey, nothing. So they wrote, not a horse, Vayikach Moshe's ishte besbona vayarkivein al noise b'nei Adam, on the things that people carry. So that's what they changed it instead of chamar. Then the pasuk says Moshe b'nei Yisrael yashvu Mitzrayim b'shar aratzis arba me'as shana. So they changed it that that it really, the pasuk says that the Jews were in Mitzrayim 400 years, but that's not true if you look at the chronology of the Chumash. So they changed it to say that the Jews were in Mitzrayim, but when you take in account the other lands that they were sojourned in, it was totaled was Arba Me'ah Shana. Okay, so they changed it so you can't make a mistake. Then by Har Sinai, it says Vayishlach as Nare B'nai Yisrael. They change it as Zatute B'nai Yisrael. The more important people of B'nai Yisrael were standing around the mountain, not the young people. Nare means that Nare can imply the foolish young people. And then also Zatute B'nai Yisrael Shalach Yadai, the pasuk was actually saying Ve'latzile B'nai Yisrael, the important people of the B'nai Yisrael. God was not angry because God could have been angry at that time. We'll see that was that they were eating and drinking. So, but they changed it towards Zatute, which is a more clearer and more in line with what they wrote before, that Zatute means importance of B'nai Yisrael. God did not kill. Then we go to Testament Beis. Moshe Rabbeinu was so angry at the Jewish people. How do you accuse me for anything? Moshe Rabbeinu said, I did not steal one donkey from you. So if you read that pasuk, you'll say that, okay, Moshe didn't steal a donkey, but he stole something else. So instead of saying, Lo chamor echa nosasi lechem, lo chemed echa mehem nosasi, I didn't take any desirable thing from you, any object from you. Then the pasuk says, so they changed that. Then it says, the pasuk Shem, don't do avodah zarah. God told to Jews, don't do avodah zarah. I gave the luminaries of the sky so that they can do the avodah zarah. Now they can slip up. The pasuk says, "Ashacholek Hashem lekecha oisam," that God gave them the luminaries to slip up to do avodah zarah. But then that would imply that the Chumash gives permissibility for a guy to do avodah zarah. So they wrote that the pasuk really should say, "Ashacholek Hashem lekecha oisam lahoyir achol ha'amim," that God put the luminaries in the sky, the sun, the moon, so to give light to the nations. And actually, why did a Torah write it in such a way that it seems to imply that God gives the luminaries in the sky so that they can have an excuse to do an avodah zarah? Because that's the way the world works. If you want to sink low, it's all open for you. It's all open for you. No one's going to stop you from doing anything. Then it says, "Vayelech v'yaved elehim acherem," and the pasuk is giving musar that you went to do avodah zarahs and you bowed to the sun and the moon, asher lo tzivisi. That's where the pasuk ends. I didn't command that you should bow to them. Or Pashtus, that's what it says. But what you can interpret is, asher lo tzivisi, God is saying, I never commanded them they should be created. So it would imply that the sun and moon created themselves without God's help. So that's why they wrote the pasuk, asher lo tzivisi, I didn't command you, la'avdam, to serve those sun and the moon. And then one other pasuk that talks about what you could eat and what you can't eat. Esar neves is the rabbit. You can't eat the rabbit. So they changed it and wrote it because as tziras l'gayim. They wrote the rabbit, the short legs. A rabbit has short legs, long hind legs. But they didn't write the arneves. The rabbit you're not allowed to eat. It's a tamei animal. Why? Because the name of the wife of Talmai was Arneves, and she didn't say, "Oh, the Torah has my name in there, and they're making fun of me." So he's going to say they're making fun of me, the Jews. They put my name in the Torah by one of the unkosher animals. Well, the bottom line is they made 14 changes, and the nace was that every one of the translators made the same change, and because of that, therefore, it showed min hashamayim that God gave siyata d'shmaya that the Sefer Torah could be translated into Greek. And we'll see in a moment why Greek more than any other language, but not every Sefer of Tanakh. It's only the Sefer Torah. Rav Shimon Gamliel loyma apsar l'tiyu shekasva el Yavanos. Amar Ababai, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rav Shimon Gamliel. Now halacha is like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Technically speaking, I can write a Sefer Torah in the Greek language. So if I wrote it like I wrote it like this is the Greek language, a right Sefer Torah. Technically speaking, it would be a kosher Sefer Torah you could be yaitzi with. Of course, we don't know the Greek language that was then at the time of the Tanoim that they're talking about. It got a little bit mixed up. But that the halacha is like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Ba'am Rabbi Yochanan, my Talmud Rav Shimon Gamliel. On Makra, the pasuk says, Yafta Elokim liyafes. God's going to make something beautiful for Yafes. V'yishkan ba'alei Shem, and his presence will be in the tents of shame. The varo shel Yefes, the speech and the words of Yefes, Yeh ba'al Shem, will be in the tenths of shame. So it seems that one of the languages of the offspring of Yefes will be kosher to be used in the tents, in the Beis Medrash in the shuls of Shem, and by the Jewish people. Maybe it's the Gomer Mogog language. Yefes had more than one offspring. He had Greek, but he had Gomer Mogog. The most beautiful language of Yefes, which was Greek, that should be in the Olei Shem. As you can know that there's some languages that are beautiful, and some language like French, but you wouldn't call Hungarian a beautiful language. So that's so only Greek was the exception. Zok the Mishnah. In order to anoint a Kohen Gadol, they, at the time of second bias, all he did was put on extra clothing, the 8 clothing of the Kohen Gadol, because originally to anoint the Kohen Gadol, you need to have special oil that was made by Moshe Rabbeinu called Shemen HaMishcha. And in the time at the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, Yashir HaMelech hid that oil, and we're not allowed to make another oil. There's a pasuk that says only oil of Moshe is called Shemen HaMishcha. Nobody else can make that oil. So therefore, Kohen Gadol that was inaugurated as a Kohen Gadol during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they didn't have this oil. So what made him a Kohen Gadol? That he put on the extra. The merubah means the important clothing, not a lot of clothing. It means the important clothing. And so there's no difference between a Kohen that existed in the first temple and a Kohen Gadol that existed in the second temple. El par haba al kol mitzvos. The Torah says that a cow, when a Kohen Gadol makes a mistake, he has to bring, if he makes an avera, instead of bringing the average korban chatas, he had to bring a cow. If he paskined for himself wrong and did an error in his psak and did an avera, he brings a par. That din was only said by a Kohen Meshuach if he actually was inaugurated by the oil. But a Kohen in the second Beis Hamikdash did not bring that par. He brought a regular korban chatas if in case he made a mistake. Then the Mishnah says, "Ein bein kohen mishamish lekohen she'over el par yom haKippurim v'asir seifa." A kohen that was serving. Let's say you had a kohen gadol that was supposed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, and then he got a mum, let's say a temporary blemish. So they appointed a substitute, and then when his blemish, the first one's blemish healed, the substitute had to give up his position to the original kohen gadol. So now, but he was for one day or a couple of weeks the kohen gadol. What's the difference between the two? There's a cow of the Yom Kippur that's only the real Kohen Gadol at the time of Yom Kippur. The other is a Kohen Gadol by name, but he's not a Kohen Gadol that you bring an extra par on Yom Kippur for his behalf. And there's a special mincha of 12 loaves of bread, 12 loaves of challah baked in an oven, and on a shallow pan. So that and fried in a shallow pan, that was a special mincha that a Kohen Gadol had to burn on the mizbeach every single day. But that was only the regular Kohen Gadol that's serving, not the substitute Kohen Gadol that took over for a period of time. I guess when he took over during that period, he was the Kohen Gadol, so he brought the Asira Seifa. But then when he was retired, he doesn't bring this Asira Seifa anymore. So the Mishnah says, we said that the difference between the Kohen Meshuach, Shemen HaMishcha, and Merubah Begadim is par haba akol mitzvahs. Hale inyan par Yom Kippurim v'asir seifa zev zev shabbat. By both Beis Hamikdash, the Kohen Gadol was a real Kohen Gadol. He brought a par on Yom Kippur and he brought the Asira Seifa. They're both equal. Says the Gemara, Mas Nisan, the law Rameir. Our Mishnah does not go like Rameir. The Rameir, a Mishnah that says if our Mishnah goes according to Rameir says that even a Merubah Megadim, even a Kohen Gadol during the second Beis Hamikdash, he would also maybe par haba kol mitzvahs. He would bring the cow abar kol mitzvahs. And our Mishnah says no, a Kohen Gadol in the second Beis Hamikdash did not bring a par haba kol mitzvahs. Divrei Rameir. So obviously our Mishnah is not like Rameir. Chachamim says no, he doesn't bring, and that is our Mishnah. My time of Rameir. What is the reason of Rameir? Because the pasuk says that only the Tanya we learned in the Brayso, Mashiach. Only if you have the oil, you bring this par. Eli ala Mashiach. I only know a Kohen Gadol that had this oil, b'Shemen HaMishcha. Meruba Megoda Menayin. How do you know that even a kohen that is not have the oil, he was inaugurated as a kohen gadol, but they didn't smear him with oil? How do you know that he brings this par herem dov shatziba? Talmud loyma ham Mashiach, the extra hay. So the hay is marba, even that kohen gadol. So the Gemara says, Mamai Akimna. What did you say this price is the like Reb Meir? You said our Mishnah is not like Reb Meir. Aim Sefer. Let us read the end of the Mishnah. There's no difference between the kohen that was a substitute kohen and the kohen that there was the original kohen gadol who took back his job. There's no difference. Only Pariyam Kippurim, Vasir Seifa, Halachol Divrayim, Zevazar Shavim. But they're equal in other matters. So that means that that Kohen Gadol, who is just a Kohen Gadol for a couple of days, he actually always wears the Shemaina Begadim, the 8 clothing, because he was always a Kohen Gadol. That part, Asin Rameya, the end of the Mishnah has to come out according to Rameya. How do you know? The time we learned in the Brisa, by Psil, Uminu by Kohen Achatachlev. Let's say a Kohen Gadol had a puzzle and they got a substitute. Rishon Chayzel by Dasai. When the first one comes back, he goes back to his original job. Sheni remains a Kohen Gadol. He was a substitute for a little bit, but Kol Mitzvahs Kahuna Gedolah Olav. He has the Mitzvahs Kahuna on him, and he still remains a Kohen Gadol. Divrei Meir. Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi says, Rishain Choyze LaAvodah. True, the first one gets his job back, but Sheni ain't a royal loyal Kohen Gadol loyal Kohen. He's nobody. He's not a Kohen Gadol, and he doesn't wear the 8 clothing, and not a Kohen head yet. And then we're going to explain the reason why. V'am Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi explained. Ma'aseh Rabbi Yossi ben Ulam b'Tzipar. Rabbi Yossi ben Ulam from Tzipar. She'era by psul b'Kohen Gadol. There was a psul in the Kohen Gadol. Uminuhu tachtav. And Yosef ben Ulam became the substitute. And then the original Kohen came back. Uva ma'aseh lefnei Chachamim. And the Chachamim had this story, what to do with Yosef ben Ulam. He was a Kohen Gadol for a day. They said, Risha and Chayzel Abaydah. So the first one goes back to his original post. Sheni, Eina Roy Loyla Kohen Gadol, Loyla Kohen Gadol. He can't be a Kohen Gadol nor a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol, Mishum Eva. He can't be a Kohen Gadol because we can't have 2 Kohen Gadol serving, right? So we can't make him a Kohen Gadol. But you can't demote him back to a Kohen Hedyot, to a plain Kohen, because once you put on the 8 clothing, you can't go down. Once you go up, you cannot go down. So according to this, Reisha Rabbanim, that we said the first part of the Mishnah is not like Reb Meir. It goes according to Rabbanim. The Sefer in the second part of the Mishnah, you're going to tell me it goes according to Rabbi Meir. You see, the first part will go Rabbanim. Second part going to Reb Meir. It's not the same author. How do you resolve that question? Yes, sometimes you find Mishnayos this way. In Reisha Rabbanim, the first part of the Mishnah is Rabbanim Sefer Reb Meir. Rabbi Yosef Omar, Rabbi Yosef says no. It's really one Tana that wrote the whole Mishnah, but that anonymous Tana is Rabbi Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he paskin in some ways. He paskin like the Rabbanim, and in some ways, in the end of the Mishnah, he paskin like Reb Meir. But Nosaf Lei Ali B'Tanai, he expressed his opinion according to those Tanoim. So that is this Mishnah. Okay.
Excellent.
I wonder if the president was shot and the vice president took over, and then the president was healed and came back, all the benefits that the president has, like forever Secret Service for him and his family, does that apply to the one that took over as president for a couple of days?
Well, you could look up what happened with Reagan when Reagan was shot.
Right. But he wasn't out of it, was he?
I don't know, but for a while he was shot, and I think in his chest. I'm not really sure, but that would be the question. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's privileges that only the president will get. The vice president will not get it. But once he became president,
Reagan was in surgery to remove the bullet. He was out of it for a couple of days. He was unconscious.
Right.
So I don't know what they take over. But we see that there's a whole machlokes in the Mishnayos over here. What happens to a Kohen Gadol? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All
great.
Right. Very good. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.